Welcome back to Going Walkabout. After living in Mexico for over a year, I can safely say I feel like I've been lied to a lot about what it's like moving to Mexico. In this video, I'm going to expose 7 of the biggest lies to living here and discuss the real truths about what it's like to be an expat, retiree, or digital nomad in this beautiful country. Okay, so we're going to dive in at number 1 lie, and that is Mexico is dangerous. After living for a year in big cities like Mexico City, and then in little places like Puerto Escondido in Huatulco, I can honestly say that I feel so much safer in Mexico than I ever did in Los Angeles. It goes without saying, you need to practice common sense wherever you are, and here in Mexico it's no different. That means you don't usually go out wearing flashy jewelry, you usually don't stay out late at night, and you certainly don't walk down, dark alleys by yourself. As they actually only have 2 places in the country that you can buy guns, overall I feel safer because I don't feel like the majority of people have guns. Ergo, I don't feel like I'm going to get held up at a grocery store or something of that nature. It's usually at this juncture that people will point to the cartel violence in Mexico. And let me tell you, after being here for a year, we have not experienced any cartel violence whatsoever anywhere that we've lived in. It's most likely because the cartels don't usually go to places that tourists or expats normally live. But I can tell you this, after living in Los Angeles and being around South Central Los Angeles, which does have a lot of gangs, and they are all armed with guns, I feel much safer in a place where the majority of people don't have guns and don't have the ability to interact in that kind of violence. Okay, our number 2 lie, and this one is pretty nefarious because it basically states that living in Mexico is cheaper, a cheaper way to live. And while that might have been the case during the 80s and 90s, Mexico has undergone inflation just like all of the other countries in the world. Along with the inflation, there's gentrification, and that's because North Americans, folks from the United States and Canada, who've moved to Mexico have pushed up the prices in a lot of the local neighborhoods, ergo pushing out a lot of the locals into other areas that are more affordable for them. To get less expensive options, you would need to be 100% fluent in Spanish and living in a fully Spanish-speaking neighborhood, which at this point, I've not met a lot of gringos that are 100% fluent, so that doesn't appear to be that big of an option. I've actually done a lot of videos on budgeting, and from that, I can tell you that food here in Mexico is less expensive, but it really depends on what you buy. Because if you're trying to get steak and seafood and things of that nature, it's still pretty costly. Vegetables and produce and things of that nature is less costly. Money savings in Mexico are not as big as they used to be, but what is still true is that the people are great here, they're very kind, and that life in general feels a lot better on a daily basis without a lot of the stresses that we have in the North American countries. Probably the biggest thing I notice is that the Mexican people are very unified, and while right now in the United States we are not unified, and that feeling permeates our everyday life in not a very good way. So while Mexico may not be the cheapest option, it's certainly one of the nicest places to live that we've been. Okay, number 3 lie. You'll get sick from the food and the water. And I have to tell you that one of the things that people write me about, I'd say almost at the top 3, would be they're worried about the water. And while you do have to be careful with the water, you shouldn't drink it and probably shouldn't cook with it. You can bathe in it, you can brush your teeth, you can wash your face. We have virtually had no problems with the water whatsoever. And then as far as the food goes, I would say you need to kind of exercise the same caution with the food here that you would exercise in the United States. I mean, when was the last time you went into an AM/PM mini market and looked at those hot dogs that they have turning around on that roller thing that look like they're 2 weeks old, maybe they're 2 days old, but you think to yourself, boy, I wouldn't eat one of those. Well, it's the same thing here in Mexico. You're gonna go by a lot of taco trucks and so forth, and you're gonna look at them and you're gonna see, are they cooking up stuff fresh daily? Does it look like they've got a lot of people queued up? If so, they're then cooking food all the time, which means the food is a lot more fresh. So you just basically have to exercise the same common sense here that you would in North America. And in an effort of full disclosure, I will tell you I have had Montezuma's revenge once in the last year, and it was pretty much my fault. There's these things here called chapulines, which are little crickets. They tend to eat them a lot in Oaxaca, but Mexico City's pretty popular to get an omelet with chapulines in it. And so I got some chapulines when we were at Chapultepec Castle. And needless to say, I got Montezuma's revenge, which I probably deserved because I cannot remember the last time I picked a cricket off the floor in Santa Monica and popped that puppy into my mouth. So fully deserved at that point. Number 4 lie, you can easily find all the comforts of home here in Mexico. And while it is a lot better than it used to be, they now have Starbucks and many places have Costco, there are still a lot of things that you're not going to get here in Mexico that you might have at home. So for instance, the only place that we've lived in that has Amazon service, it was Mexico City. We've recently been in Merida, and in Merida they had Uber. But we are just down the road, a couple hours in Quintana Roo, and we've been in Tulum, and we're now in Playa del Carmen, and they don't have Uber. So you have to figure out how to get a taxi and so forth. Things of that nature are kind of spotty throughout the country, and I think it really just depends on the vibrancy and use of those types of apps. And not to mention, it's very local. So in this case, the local taxi companies did not want Uber, so they've kept it out. So you have to kind of look up those things before you decide to move to a place in Mexico to find if they'll accept those types of new apps and so forth. Another thing that's not like home is constant hot water. In many places, that's kind of tricky or difficult to find, so if that's important to you, that would be something you would want to qualify up front. Sewage systems are not always the best, especially in the older cities. People need to remember that a lot of the cities in Mexico started as far back as like 1540. And while they started building all these places, it's very hard for them to retrofit sewage systems and so forth. So many places that we've lived in, you need to throw the toilet paper in a wastebasket, not down the toilet, because they don't have the sewage infrastructure to accept all those different things being processed through that particular stream. And I do believe in the past, internet was a bit patchy, but in the last year, we have found it to be outstanding. In fact, regardless of where we are, and we're in some pretty small places a lot of the time, we've had excellent uninterrupted internet, which, as we all know, is pretty important these days. When it comes to power outages, we have found that the coastal environments, especially during the rainy season, will suffer more outages than other places. So as far as the comforts of home, not quite there yet, but I think they're doing very well. So our 5th lie, and that's that Mexican healthcare is third world. And if you're Mexican, I apologize up front because I know you hate that terminology, but I took this directly out of an article from NPR. The other thing the article said, though, is that prior to the pandemic, over 1.25 million Americans came to Mexico for health care. I think initially a lot of people came to Mexico for cosmetic procedures and dental procedures. But as time has gone up and the expenses for healthcare in the United States have gone up as well, more and more people are coming to Mexico for all types of healthcare procedures because they are 50 to 70% less than they are in the United States. I guess something that's kind of funny is that we've had quite a few healthcare visits and dentist visits while we've been here. And what we have found is that the majority of doctors and dentists are actually trained and get their diplomas in the United States. Lastly, just to put a fine point on this, In the visits that we've been to and been in the different offices, we have found that they mostly have state-of-the-art equipment. So this is a far cry away from being a third world country when it comes to healthcare. Number 6, we have, it's always warm and sunny in Mexico, and that could be something that is kind of a rumor that a lot of people that come on spring break perpetuate. But the reality is that Mexico has a very diverse climate, especially when you get to the center of the country. The center of the country, where Mexico City is and San Miguel de Allende, they're at a very high altitude. And due to that, they actually have a very moderate climate, and their winter is usually like November to January, in which case it gets quite cold. I mean, you're talking wearing coats and so, but it does get cold, and there are a lot of different environments. The other thing that you'll find is that they do have a very definitive rainy season, which is mostly along the coastal areas, but it also comes into the center of the country. When we lived in Mexico City, it would be like clockwork where it would rain every night from 4 to 6 during the rainy season. It was actually quite nice. It got rid of any kind of smog and so forth, made everything feel very fresh, and eliminated any kind of heat that was building up during the day as well. And the number 7 lie is, it's just party, party, party all night long. Fiesta all the time. This is actually a really big lie. But you know, while the Mexican people love to celebrate, they will celebrate literally anything. They are also the hardest working people I've ever seen. And because of that, they are really advancing their place in the global world of finance and currently, Mexico is the 15th largest economy in the world, and they're the #1 exporter out of Latin American countries. Due to this, they have upgraded the majority of their population, 50% of it, to being more of a middle-class population, which is fantastic. They're actually leading in industries like the automotive industry, aviation industry, aerospace. Mexico is poised to become a global powerhouse in the years to come. So far from being party central, it's really a place that I think is going to have a very bright future in the global economy. And it goes without saying, at that point, the people here will really have something to party about. So that's it, 7 lies that I tell you just have no truth to them whatsoever after having lived here for over a year. Thanks so much for watching today. We hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, a like or a thumbs up is hugely appreciated. Better yet, subscribe. We do a new video every week. Thanks again, and cheers for now.